humans. It is so awesome to be able to say that on stage. In so many other conferences, you don't get to recognize our humanity. So thank you so much for coming today. It is so exciting to be here. I want to start out with just some questions. How many of you know quite a lot about mindfulness? Okay, maybe I'll ask the other question. How many of you know nothing about mindfulness at all? Oh, good. Okay, thank you. How many of you are in organizations that are already introducing mindfulness in some way, shape, or form? Wow, fantastic. That is great. How many of you are regular practitioners of mindfulness? So you already have a daily practice. Again, that is awesome. What I find amazing is over the years, and I think many of us have seen this, is that mindfulness has gone from a place where for many of us, we didn't used to talk about it because it was something weird and maybe a little bit flaky and fluffy. And nowadays, when we look at it, the opportunity for us to bring it into organizations to be able to enhance performance, creativity, and well-being is something that it seems like a lot of you have already experienced and already doing in your organizations. What I want to do today is hopefully make this an interactive and experiential session to share with you some of our experience and learning. One, why mindfulness is so important today. Two, how we bring mindfulness into organizations to make it simple and not flaky and not fluffy, but also to give you a practical experience of how you can make it real in terms of bringing it into day-to-day work life. Does that sound good? All right. Oh, thank you. That's great. All right, so let's start out with the first question, which is, why is mindfulness important? And basically, when we're looking, and you've probably seen this, organizations around the globe are introducing mindfulness into their organizations. And why is that? And basically, in our experience, what we see, and see if this is true for you, is that organizations today are experiencing a tremendous amount of pressure. People are feeling always on. People are feeling information overload and environments that are filled with distractions. How many of you can relate to at least 3 out of those 4? How many are going 4 for 4? All right, now this is a question I always love to ask. How many people think that just somehow, so we call this the paid reality. This is what you get paid to go to work every day to experience. Most of you can agree with that, right? How many of you think that somehow on its own, this paid reality is what we're experiencing now, but somehow it's going to get better? There's always some optimists in the group. Please come see me afterwards, the 2 of you back there. For the rest of us and myself as well, we see this as a paid reality, and in our experience, we're expecting that it's probably going to continue to get worse. More pressure, more information, more distractions. And this is what these organizations, and probably many of you are seeing, and the reason for what are we going to do about this? Because that's the external reality. But the other aspect is looking at the internal reality. And for that, what we want to look at is something called attention deficit trait, which basically many of you have heard about attention deficit disorder, a neurological condition that makes it difficult for us to stay focused and pay attention. And what we're seeing in workplaces today is because of the paid reality, people are now experiencing attention deficit trait, having that same inability to stay focused and pay attention. Any guesses on how bad the problem is? How many would say, what percentage of time do you think people are not paying attention? And if you want, I can repeat that question in case you weren't. Just saying. It's natural. How many people, what percentage? Throw out numbers. 60. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. The research says that it's about half of our waking hours we are not paying attention. And what that means is basically you're here right now, but you might be thinking about lunch. You're here right now, but you're thinking about the session earlier today. You're in and out of the room, basically from a mind perspective. And when we look at that in terms of the workplace, what that means is that half of the time we can be focused, we can be effective, we can be creative. The rest of the time, not so much. We can be disengaged, we can be rigid in terms of our thinking, we can be distracted. So what we see is that on the one hand, you could look at this as depressing, but the way we see this is there's enormous potential. And essentially, from a workplace perspective, if we look at what we now see, and many researchers are looking at what we're seeing is called an attention economy. Basically, it used to be from an HR perspective, many of you are HR professionals in the room, that in terms of being able to get the most out of yourself and also for your workers, the key thing was in terms of whether people had the skills and whether people had the time to do it. And now what we're saying is you can have all the time in the world and you can have the greatest skills. But if you don't have the attentional discipline, the attentional muscle to be able to maintain focus on the task at hand, it doesn't matter what time you have and what skills, you won't be able to be effective. Does that make sense? That was a really firm yes, I heard, especially from over in that corner of the room. Well, it's basically because if we look at it, I mean, from a workplace perspective, attention matters, right? Attention is really important. How many of you results are important? For all of us, right? Results are critically important, and this is true at work, but also at home. And basically, if we look at where do results come from? Results basically come from our actions come from our choices, and our choices basically come from what we pay attention to and the quality of our attention. Is there anybody in the room that has had fantastic results without paying attention? If you have, please come see me afterwards because I'd really like to know how you did that. But for most of the rest of us, the ability for us to achieve the results that are important to us comes from being focused and attentive to the task at hand.